Hello, I'm Dr. Jeanette Raymond, psychologist, psychotherapist, and relationship expert, here with part 6 of my series on triangular relationships. And the one I'm going to talk about today is between a husband and a wife, where one of them is remarried and there's a stepchild in the relationship. So you have a father and a mother and a stepchild. And one of the parents is the biological parent and the step-parent is not. And that's where the problem begins. In these kind of relationships, it doesn't really matter the age of the child because there's always a sense from the biological parent that no matter how much they want the person they've just married to be the main dad or the main mom, they always have a sense of protecting that biological child. There's a sense that the partner they've just married is not part of the family, it's in the DNA, and they become the other, right? The one who's not blood. And there's a natural built-in sense of protection. That's what one version of it is. And so the child learns that they can get away with things, they can go to the biological parent. Then there's competitiveness between the biological child and the non-biological parent. So the stepchild becomes the issue. There's competitiveness for the love and attention and being number one for the parent whose child is in the family. The new person, the partner who's just been brought in, has to find a way of relating to the child into which his life he came in, and it becomes awkward, competitive. The child can either become very withdrawn or act out. The parents quarrel over who has the right to tell the child what to do, what not to do, what the rules are, how to behave, and so on and so forth. So that's one kind of terrible dimension. There's another terrible dimension that happens between parent, child, and stepchild. Parent, stepchild. And that is when the new parent coming in wants to win the love of the stepchild. So they spoil the child, they go overboard, they try to be friends with them instead of an authority figure. And then there's tension between the biological child and his or her biological parent. So the new person coming in tries to create a bond between him or herself and the child instead of working on the marital bond. And so again, this triangle creates havoc in these kind of relationships. There's one other issue that crops up with two parents and a stepchild, and that is when the biological parent gives up on the parenting. If they get overwhelmed with parenting before they got married and brought the new partner into the relationship, they're going to want to give up that burden to the new partner, and the new partner wants to prove that they're going to take it on, it's all going to work, everything's going to be fine, they're going to be the best step parent ever, make the relationship so good that no one would even know that they're not biologically related. So the biological parent kind of gives up and takes a back seat. And then the child is torn between keeping the connection between him or her and the biological parent, or responding to this new parent who's suddenly turning his world into a magical Disneyland. And that creates a loss of structure within the family, because the mother or the father, whoever the biological parent is giving up ownership, if you like, giving up authority to the step parent, and the whole relationship gets skewed. So the biological parent and their child become more estranged, and the child feels less loved and wanted, gets angry, starts acting out, and the step-parent with his or her stepchild, they become the focus of the bond, and so the marriage then starts to fall apart. So in all these different ways, having a person come in as a step-parent into a situation where there's a parent and a child has to be done very, very carefully before the marriage begins. There has to be an agreement between the parent and the new one coming in, how they're going to organize their marriage, the parts they're going to play, what's okay, what isn't, how they keep the marital bond the number one bond, and how the child can feel safe with both of them, can trust both of them, can talk to both of them, but they're both going to be different relationships without dissing or disparaging the second biological parent who may or may not be in the picture, who the child may or may not have contact with. And in these kinds of situations, it's really, really important that the two parents who are going to start a new family with the stepchild have counseling before, a kind of premarital counseling if you like, and that the family as a whole have a lot of family therapy, so that whatever comes out, all the fears about how things are going to go, who's going to feel what, who's going to let go of what, who's going to take over, who's going to start calling the shots, what happens when the child acts out. Or the child could get very withdrawn and regress. This is also very common in younger children. They become more babyish and they want more attention, or they just disappear and do their own thing, and then the parents are wondering where they are and wondering if they're self-harming. So let me give you one example of a family that I worked with who had this issue. There was a female child, about 5, only child of her parents. The father and mother divorced, and the mother was left alone with the child. She felt very insecure. She felt very hurt by her ex-husband's wanting to leave and live a very different life, didn't stay in touch. And eventually the mom met another guy and she married him. And so the little girl had a stepfather. Now the stepfather became more and more possessive of the mother, and so the bond that had been created between the little girl and her mother was beginning to get interfered with. The father came in as the third point in the triangle and separated the mother from her daughter. And unfortunately, because mom was so insecure and afraid, she allowed it to happen. She allowed herself to be completely bossed and controlled by her new husband, because she was so afraid of losing him if she didn't do exactly what she said. And having already been abandoned by one man, she certainly didn't want it to happen again. Unfortunately, her little girl had no one to talk to. She had no sense of being loved by her stepfather. She felt her mother going away, and when her mother was sad, if something happened between her mother and stepfather, she was the one who went to comfort her mother. She felt unwanted by her stepfather. He was so controlling that her life was a hell, and he always thought the worst of her. He never encouraged her. He always was jealous of her and the bond between herself and her mom. So of course he kept trying to break it, and he would put loyalty contests between them, so that if mom ever did something with the child that he didn't agree with or he wasn't included in, he would take it out on mom, and the little girl then became an object of punishment. So when she was 16, she started to stay out longer in the evenings with her friends, and she left as soon as she could. And forevermore, the bond between herself and her mother changed. She had already lost her father biologically, because he left and never kind of kept in touch. And now the only father that she did have from 5, a stepfather, was not a father. He was a controlling person who wanted to be obeyed at all costs and didn't care about the feelings of his stepchild. He just wanted his wife to do as he said, even if it meant ruining their relationship and creating havoc for the little girl who grew up feeling unwanted, uncared for, and very, very insecure in her adult life. So this is how the third, an intruder, comes in between two people, in this case mother and child, and it's a stepchild situation, step-parent situation, where the biological parent is so weak that they cannot stand up to their new partner because they're afraid of losing them, and the parent-child bond becomes completely undone and affects that child several generations hence. So again, family counseling is so important. Premarital counseling is so important. Individual counseling for that little girl would have been so important because she had no one to talk to and was full of all these terrible feelings. Is she a good girl? Why isn't she loved? Why doesn't her mother want her anymore? It was awful, awful, awful. And it only came out in her 30s when she sought therapy because she wanted to become a mother herself. So I hope this rings some bells with you. I'll be happy to hear your experiences in the comments box and look